G'day. Today we're doing a bit of work on a Hydramatic 05, or also known as the Roto Hydramatic or the F85, but that's only got the name from the old American Oldsmobile F85 if you're over in the States. In Australia we call them a Turbo Hydramatic 05 or a Roto Hydramatic 05, or 240 I think have a different pan on it. Now these transmissions, they were in the Australian Holdens, the EK to EH, I think the middle of EH, 61 to 64 I think, or 65, and the same era in the States, about 61 to 63. Australia's a little bit behind. Now you might have noticed these don't have a torque converter. Well, they do, they have, but it's inside the transmission. On the outside they have what's called a damper plate, and you can see the damper plate there, and you can see it's pretty well buggered. It's sloppy there on the splines, and this is bolted up onto your crankshaft or onto the flywheel. And what they do, they have these little springs, little cushion springs that cushion this inner plate with the outer plate. There are tiny little friction linings there, like on a clutch or on a brake, and that just takes a bit of the shock out of that system. Now you can still recondition these. We recondition them. You can replace, well, springs sometimes break, that plate there wears out, the little pads in there, they wear out, the little hub there, the splines will flog out as well. So it's all still repairable and obtainable, but they are quite expensive because of the rarity of the transmission. And another thing you might notice on this transmission is where the bolt holes are through the bell housing, they've got little rubber cushions on there, which is another unusual thing you don't find on transmissions anymore. Now these also have a pressure regulator valve that is accessible with the transmission in the vehicle. You can pull that out, pressure regulator valve, and this one here is a limit valve on the torque converter or the fluid coupler. So you can actually access them if they get a bit sticky or something like that. You pull them out. You can see the little hex bolt on it there. Just replace the O-ring if you're doing that. And if you watch my videos, you will be familiar with that shape there. That's actually what we made one of our wash pans out of, where we wash our parts from. These have a 20 bolt pan. There's our wash pan there. Filter. Always a good idea to loosen all the bolts before you hit them with the tech gun or the rattle gun. I'm taking the valve body off. Now on this linkage here, there is a little circlip there, just so you can slide out that bracket when you're getting the valve body off. And try and not lose it. Now I think all these bolts, the short ones are the same length, and all the longer ones are the same length. So you choose to leave them in there, just so you don't get them mixed up, or you can take them out. You got this little Z-link here. Slide that off. Now over here we've got the band adjustment. You've got the servo piston that applies that band, that one. And here we have an accumulator piston, which is like a like a cushion. Can't really muck that one up because it's got a tapered spring on the bottom and this spring goes on top. So tapered, then you got that little piston with the lip seal facing up, and the top one's got a alloy or aluminium sealing ring. Oops, it goes like that. That's that one. And this one, you can't really muck it up either. It's got the larger spring, just sits on there with the piston, but it's a good idea to pull all that apart and just make sure everything's okay and not worn in there. You can see that something's happened with that circlip. Someone's tried to take it off at some stage. There you go, the end of it's broken off. So whether someone's tried to take it off without relieving the pressure on that rod and broken it off, or it's broken off from the impact of the shifts. Circlip there, we'll take that one off because the selector is in the way when you're sliding that off, sliding that extension housing off. I'm just going to take the tension off that spring there on that selector. There we go, that one there. We've got that circlip out, we can push that rod right through now. And you've got to sort of jiggle this because they get burrs on it. There we go. There we go. Spring. And that's all we're trying to get, that piece that's straddling over those two parts of that case. Now over here we've got the governor valve in here and the governor support, and over here it's important to check that those rings haven't chewed into the housing. They usually wear out on the bottom side, which is up here, but these don't look too bad. And this here's the parking pole, and pull that pin out. Oh, there's another little sleeve. There's a sleeve either side of that pin. There's one on this side, and there's another one still in the case there. I'll be able to get it out, but there we go. That one there is a tiny little sleeve, and that goes on one side of that pole or pin, and the other side goes on there. Now you can see that that shaft, I can pull it in and out. It's probably about 50 thou clearance. You can do like a rough reference point measurement. And we've got probably inch and 120 thou, and if I push it in, it goes to an inch and 50 thou. So there's about 70 thou clearance or end float there. And again, there's a sealing ring in there, and that runs on this housing. You want to make sure it hasn't chewed into it. go, we've got the pump housing. Alright, now you can check these vanes. If you take out one of these vanes, show you, you can see you take a note of the wear point, and quite often you can flip them over at 180 degrees. You can see it's always pushing that way because there's wear points on that part of it, and over here and over here. And you can see these rings here that hold the vanes in place. There's one under that rotor and one on the outside. You don't want to mix it up, otherwise these worn bits can chew into the pump surface there. I'm saying that because sometimes you have to reuse them because of the age of the transmission. You can't get the parts, so you've got to just either flip things around 180 degrees and reuse it, or reuse whatever's serviceable or what you need to. This surface here looks nice and smooth, so the pump doesn't look too bad on this one. And like I mentioned earlier, you've got your pressure control valve there, and this one we've got this Torrington bearing or needle roller bearing at the front there. You want to make sure that hasn't chewed into anything. Over here we've got the pressure ports if you're testing that before you pull it out of the vehicle. Now we're taking off the torus or torque multiplier there, like the torque converter there, the fluid coupling. You've got to make sure you don't damage anything when you're loosening. They are on very tight, so what we do is we get some locking pliers and a bar and make sure that the teeth on your pliers are not damaging the splines or anything like that. There's a little torque converter or the fluid coupling. Now to be able to get the rest of that out, there's a little circlip. Now these have one of those little sort of windy circlips, so you've got to find the end of it and then just slowly unravel it off that while you're pushing that shaft up, just to take the tension off that spring clip. There we go. You can see it's just unraveling there now. Now you don't want to bend it too much, you don't want to damage that. Like I said, parts are very hard to find for these old bangers. There we go. Now because there's a sealing ring here, you want to always check that little surface there that it hasn't dug in, and this one has dug in a little bit. So we'll end up putting the ring in there and just seeing how worn that is. Again, another sealing ring there. And now we've got this big circlip here we can take off. Still need to push the shaft up from underneath just so it takes the load off that circlip. Now it's easy if you put it on the side like that, just to get that circlip off. Gasket. And the rest of the Taurus. Planetary gear, you can see I've already found what the problem is. That little thrust washer's broken. Fibre washer. Sun gear. These thrust washers wear out. Clutch drum. These clutch plates are very expensive. Another little fibre washer. It looks like, no, it's just popped off. One of the sealing rings have popped off. Now the rear end, the output shaft will just come out at this point, and you can see that that drum where the band runs, it's got a bit of metal to metal action. Now I've got these pointy nose pliers with that just machined off a little bit, just so I can grab into those. Or if you're able to get a screwdriver there, you can also work that out in that slot as well. But it depends where they put the join of the circlip. Can't do it with the camera there. No, you do that. Just tighten them up, just push it down, just till we get one side out. Right, yeah. Well, there you go. There we go. Just get one side off. And we can just move that circlip out. And then there's another little fibrous, sorry, I forgot to mention, you want to be careful you don't dig into it if you're prying with a screwdriver, or you'll damage that little fibre tapered washer. I'll show you in a moment. It's got to come out evenly, so I might have to flip it over and just let it fall out. Get it out nice and evenly, it should come out. And with pulling it both sides, I suppose you could probably get a slide hammer and just tap it out evenly, but you risk breaking that little fibre part there. They do break quite easily. I'd hate to know what they're worth. You can see that runs in there on that. And here we have the piston. We need to take out these two plugs there. There's a little pin. Careful we don't lose them. Spring loaded. Up. One. And two. And it does help if you just wiggle that seal out a little bit. They're easier to push out from the inside. You don't want to damage the housing. But just removing those springs might be enough to allow us to pull that piston out. It's a pain in the bum because you've got to do it nice and evenly. They are precision fitted in there. If it cocks to one side, it just gets jammed up. It's like those rubber seals are just holding it a little bit too much. They were probably just holding it a little bit too much. Now it might come out a bit easier. Yep, there we go. Centre support, and you got the cone and the piston. You also have that little locking pin there. And now we can pull the band out. We might need to just loosen that adjuster. We haven't loosened that yet. Just loosen that. And we've got the band. Doesn't look too bad actually. And that's the little strut that applies the band. There's a pin on the other side of that adjuster that just sort of pushes into that. And you can see it's actually worn a little indent on that. Can't muck them up. And the other one, this one, that sits on the other side on the case. That's the anchor bolt, or the anchor pin, sorry. There we go, it's all apart. Just going to go through now, and that's a little pin on the other side of that adjuster that's fallen out. We're going to go through, possibly try and find another drum there. Doesn't look too bad, it's unusual. The band still looks alright. Go through, check all the mating surfaces. What did we find? Oh, one of these little fibre ring washers that's shattered in there. That one. The other side of that sun gear, but it still was in position, so the end float was probably a little bit too much, but you can adjust it here and there with wider thrust washers. Go through, put a gasket and seal kit through it, ring kit, the band. We've got to just inspect the thickness of the lining, pull that apart. You've got to undo those bolts to get that apart. What else have we got? This one here, you've got to compress that piston. There's little springs there to get that circlip out and pop off. Don't forget to put your little tube seals on that center support in. They sit under those springs. And that's about it. Oh, to the governor valve, this gear here, when you're getting that off, you can slide hammer it off just evenly. A little bit of heat on it will help it expand a little bit, and you can slide it off easier. And also when you're getting it back on, you heat it up and you'll be able to slide it on, and it just sits right in the middle of that there. Once you get that off, you'll be able to undo the governor valve, go through, make sure none of the valves are sticking or stuck. And it's a good idea to always check the sealing rings in the bores wherever they are. You can see those ones have like a little lock step on them, and basically once they wear out to that diameter, they can't seal anymore. What you can do is just file that step just so they can open up a tiny little bit more, but you want to make sure you file it perfectly square and be very careful, because you can file it off very easily and then you'll have trouble putting it all back together because it doesn't have that lock on there anymore. That's if you can't get the rings. Bushings, you've got to either just check to make sure that they're not too worn on the mating surfaces on the journals. If they are worn or they're hard to measure, what you actually do is you measure the journal and machine up a little dolly just so you can test the bushes. And rule of thumb, you should have about 3/1000ths of an inch clearance between the bush and the journal. If you have anything more, it can sort of work around too much. Anything less doesn't allow for heat expansion. What else have we got? That's probably about all of it. We're just going to go through slowly. Anyway, I hope that helps. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Throw us a beer if any of this information has helped. The link's in the description. Much appreciated. And if you do send us a beer, send it as a friend. Otherwise, the Paint Pal take a fee out of it. Thank you for watching.